There was an old shampoo commercial, sorry, not that shampoo commercial, that said you never get a second chance to make a first impression. And truer words have never been spoken. We'll never forget the time the Millennium Clock counted down and introduced the WWE fanbase to Y2J, or when Kevin Owens made his first appearance on the big stage, beat up John Cena, and stepped on the United States title. How about the time Kane ripped the door off of the Hell in the Cell cage and left his older brother, The Undertaker, laying? So good. But these events don't always go off without a hitch. When they go wrong, it can be really tough to recover. I'm Senior Siete for 7 Wrestling. Let's take a look at 7 wrestlers who screwed up their first big moment. Now, before we get into this, we appreciate your support, so if you enjoyed this video, please hit the like button, subscribe to the channel, and people's elbow that notification bell. Number 1, Tonga Loa. The bloodline is kind of like a mugwai. They reproduce at an astounding rate, and apparently, this is what happens after you feed them after midnight. When Roman Reigns was defeated at WrestleMania 40 and the original bloodline was completely splintered shortly afterwards, Solo Sikoa, who had designs on becoming the new tribal chief, needed some backup and quickly. And seeing as the gimmick's whole thing is that they're part of the same bloodline, they needed to be related. For example, Solo Sikoa is the younger brother of Jimmy and Jey Uso. All 3 of them are the sons of Rikishi, and Rikishi is the nephew of Sika Anoa'i of Wild Samoans fame, and one of Sika's sons is Roman Reigns. I think? Holy crap. Thank you, WWE, for releasing this family tree. Okay, Solo Sikoa needed to fill out his new roster, and he went with the Tonga Kid's son, so technically Solo's cousin, Jacob Fatu, as well as Tama Tonga and Tonga Loa. Tama and Tonga are the sons of WWE legend and world's toughest human being, Haku. Haku is not technically related to the Anoa'i or the Maivia bloodline, but the family does consider him to be an uncle of some sort. Still with me? Anyhow, whenever a new team member was introduced, they had to do it in a big fashion. Solo Sikoa himself was introduced to the main roster when he came out of nowhere to help Roman Reigns retain the WWE Universal All Everything All at Once title from Drew McIntyre at the 2022 Clash at the Castle Premium Live event. Tama Tonga made his debut on the April 12, 2024 episode of SmackDown, helping Solo kick Jimmy out of the bloodline. Very impressive. Jacob Fatu made his debut on the June 21st, 2024 episode of SmackDown, beating up everybody in the entire world, including Randy Orton, Kevin Owens, and Cody Rhodes. Quite a roster. Now, before we move on, I know I'm like the millionth person to make this observation, but Jacob Fatu's the guy, right? Ugh, love him. Tonga Loa's debut, well, let's just say 2 out of 3 isn't bad. It was at the 2024 Backlash PLE where Tonga Loa was set to make his presence felt in front of the most magnifique WWE crowd in memory. Kevin Owens had Tama Tonga pinned after a 6 spot, and the referee was going for the 3 count. The scripted moment was going to have Tonga Loa emerge from under the ring to pull the referee out and break the count. But Tonga's timing was terrible, and the ref basically had to back himself out of the ring. Yikes. Ah well, fortunately, he'd never do anything embarrassing like that ever again. You know, except for the time he went to low blow Kevin Owens and just kind of punched him in the derriere. Haha, more French. Oh, and then he followed that up by punching his own brother in the head. Low bar with this guy. Low bar? Nothing? Alright, moving on. Number 2, the Shockmaster. Alright, I don't think you could do a list like this without including the patron saint of people screwing up their debuts, so let's just get him out of the way early. Fred Ottman, the brother-in-law of a son of a plumber and the uncle to a nightmare, just kind of showed up in the WWE one day on the side of none other than the biggest name in the company, Hulk Hogan. Hulkster explained that he had personally trained Ottman, who would now be known as Tugboat. Oh, the early 90s. Tugboat, who would dress like a sailor man, red and white striped shirt, sailor hat, even giving a little toot toot to the fans when he'd wrestle. What's not to love? Tugboat would eventually turn heel, changing his name to Typhoon and teaming up with Earthquake as the Natural Disasters. But the original plan for his heel turn is way too good not to mention. You see, throughout the Hulkster's illustrious career, the storyline he seems to be the most fond of is this: Hulk Hogan's ungrateful friend stabs him in the back. For reference, see Paul Orndorff, Andre the Giant, Randy Savage, Brutus Brother Brute Eye Zodiac, Booty Man, Disciple Beefcake, etc. Tugboat was originally scheduled to give Hulk Hogan the same treatment. However, there is a twist, and it's a doozy, so, hold on to your butts. Wait, it's important to know that this was all the summer before WrestleMania 7, and the United States was on the brink of war with Iraq. Wow, what a sentence. Sorry. All right, on his Something to Wrestle With podcast, Bruce Pritchard would say, the idea was that Hulk Hogan's new best friend, the Tugboat, would turn his back on the USA and adopt the ways of the Middle East and become Sheik Tugboat. Sheik Tugboat. Fortunately, Sergeant Slaughter would return to the company, and that storyline made way more sense for him. Although that was kind of hot garbage too, but like slightly colder garbage than Sheik Tugboat. We're way off track here, sorry. Ottman would have a pretty successful run with the company, winning the World Tag Team titles with the Earthquake, but by 1993 he made the jump to WCW, and seeing as how the WWE owned the rights to the Tugboat and Typhoon characters, it was time for something new. And that something new was like a fur, sleeveless duster, kinda? And a mask that was clearly a bedazzled stormtrooper helmet. And his new moniker was the Shockmaster, for whatever that's worth. I don't know what that means. They wanted to give him the biggest launch possible, so he was slated to be the mystery partner for Sting, the British Bulldog, and Dustin Rhodes in a War Games match against Sid Vicious, Harlem Heat, and Big Van Vader. Finally, it was time to let the sparkly furry cat out of the bag. And on an episode of Ric Flair's talk show A Flair for the Gold at Clash of the Champions 24, Sting said their mystery partner was going to shock the world because he was the Shockmaster. And with that, Ottman burst through a breakaway wall in the set, tripped over a part of the framing, and tumbled his way into wrestling infamy. They tried to retcon this, having the Shockmaster just be like a regular Joe who got excited at his big entrance, couldn't find the door, and just kind of barreled through the set. They even tried changing his name to Uncle Fred who loved watching cartoons with kids, but it was too late. Fortunately, Ottman had a great sense of humor about it and had some fun with it over the years. They even released a WWE action figure of the Shockmaster that was upside down in the packaging. We will say this though, all of this that happened in WCW still worlds better than Sheik Tugboat. Number 3, Chronic. Maybe one of the best things to come from the legalization of marijuana is that it makes it less edgy and taboo. I'm not one for weed. I surely don't begrudge anybody who does. It's just not for me. It just seems a little juvenile to find it funny. Although, in their defense, I didn't care for parenting humor before I had a kid, and now I find this stuff hilarious. Back to the point. So to call a 90s tag team Chronic and litter their gimmick with weed references, including calling their finisher the High Times, it didn't do it for me. It also didn't help when you think of people who partake in such activities, your brain doesn't immediately go to big, beefy monsters like Bryan Adams and Brian Clark. What do I know? The tag team became wildly popular in the dying days of WCW, and when McMahon purchased the company in 2001, the duo's contracts weren't a part of the deal. So, during the WCW-ECW invasion, The Undertaker had won the unified WCW and WWE tag team titles with his make-believe brother Kane, and they did it in such a dominant fashion, absolutely humiliating Diamond Dallas Page and Kanyon in a steel cage at SummerSlam 2001. Problem was, WCW and ECW didn't have a ton of big names they could pair up with the Brothers of Destruction. Bigger names like Booker T and Rob Van Dam were tied down in feuds for the 2 world titles, and they had just squished DDP like a bug. even going so far as to let The Undertaker's wife get a pinfall victory over Paige just for funsies. So, The Undertaker called in a favor and convinced Vince McMahon to sign his longtime buddy Bryan Adams and his tag team partner Brian Clark so he'd have someone believable to wrestle. They immediately brought them in and paired them up against The Undertaker and Kane, which Brian Clark would later go on record saying he thought was a terrible idea. You see, Chronic hadn't been in the ring for quite some time, and it can take a bit to shake off the ring rust. But nah, they gave him a quick squash or two, then booked the two teams to face off in pay-per-view. So yes, technically this isn't their debut as they had destroyed Kai and Tai on SmackDown, but this is their first big match, more of a coming out party for the duo, and in hindsight, it might be more accurate to say it was a coming out of employment party. This match wasn't Bradshaw and Trish Stratus against Jackie Data and Chris Nowinski bad. It was pretty bad. The four men were so lost that Stevie Richards would call an audible and get into the ring so he could at least make Taker and Kane look good by taking a big chokeslam. At any rate, when they all got to the back, Undertaker was mad, Kane was mad, Chronic was mad, and most importantly, Vince McMahon was mad. It seems like they were just kind of lost. Clark and Adams didn't have the athletic ability to feed into a big man's comeback as quickly as smaller wrestlers would. Now that I think about it, maybe they just didn't have a great template for a tag team match between four monster powerhouse wrestlers. In the Road Warriors' heyday, they tended to face smaller teams like the Midnight Express or the Horsemen, or brawlers like the Nasty Boys, or behemoths like the Natural Disasters. At any rate, nobody looked good in this fiasco, and when push comes to shove, Vince is choosing The Undertaker over anyone. Bryan Adams was fired immediately, and Brian Clark would get sent to developmental, where he'd hang out for a bit before asking for his release. Number 4. The Miz. What a weird entity The Miz is, right? I mean, we all respect the guy. We know he went through hell in his early days because he was seen as someone who only made the roster because he had little fame due to his time on the real world. He paid his dues, learned the craft, and arguably was the biggest heel in the WWE when he won his first world title back in 2010. He stuck around, he's a company guy, he does all the press he possibly can, doesn't get into trouble, everybody seems to respect him. I don't look forward to any of the guy's matches, but I get that he's a good, reliable talent. But did he have a bad first day on Raw. At the time, The Miz was kind of the host of SmackDown, but he had been tasked with hosting the 2006 Diva Search competition along with Ashley Massaro. This would be the best thing and the worst thing that could possibly happen to Mr. Mizanin. It was the best because he would meet and fall in love with his future wife and the mother of his two daughters, Maurice. Maurice. And the worst because when it was time to bring the contestants to the ring for their introduction on the July 10th, 2006 episode of Monday Night Raw, The Miz defecated the bed. Figuratively. Yeah, not for real. The Miz would stumble over his lines, correct himself when he called them the sexiest women in the world. Apparently they're just the sexiest women on TV. When it came time to tell the fans how to vote, he clearly didn't know how they should go about doing that, which seems important, for a competition. Also, I forgot the Miz's catchphrase was hoorah. That's a little fun fact for us all. I don't know, maybe it didn't matter because everyone forgot the Miz even existed once the ladies came out. On the WWE 24/7 special, The Miz would explain what happened by saying, "Cold sweat came over me and my entire mind went blank, and then I started hearing the audience. You can feel an audience drain out and know that you're messing up. Most important thing I had to remember was the phone number, and I forgot it, so I looked at my wrist, and I was sweating so much that it erased off of my wrist, and I remember going backstage thinking, I'm gonna get fired." Well, obviously Vince wasn't in a vengeful mood that day, as he encouraged The Miz to focus on bullet points and gave him a second chance. But yeah, as he stumbled over his lines and looked like a complete idiot, can't imagine anyone thinking, this guy is absolutely going to defeat John Cena in the main event of WrestleMania someday. Number 5, Steve Williams. Jim Ross certainly had a thing for Steve Dr. Death Williams. Maybe it's because he played for the Oklahoma Sooners. JR definitely loves that football team. I'm sure that JR was also into the fact that Steve Williams was a legitimate tough guy. Old school guys get giddy when someone can handle themselves in a bar fight. They cry themselves to sleep knowing that people like Adam Cole are successful. So when Dr. Death made his way into the WWE in 1998, good old JR certainly had high hopes for his buddy. In fact, he was believed to be so tough and such a legitimate badass that a shoot fighting tournament was set up with the assumption being that Williams would tear through the competition and immediately be set up for a world title feud against the reigning champion Steve Austin. Oh, another fun fact, Steve Austin's real name is actually Steve Williams, but he changed it for wrestling because Dr. Death was already a well-known talent. Okay, for those of you who aren't familiar with the inner workings of pro wrestling, everything you see on TV is scripted or predetermined. That's known as a work. Anything that's real is considered a shoot. So a shoot tournament meant that there was no predetermined winner, and these guys would really be fighting it out, which is dumb for a wide variety of reasons, but we're just going to talk about 3 of them. First, it is very confusing to promote a product that is scripted and then try to get across the concept of, oh, what you're seeing right now is actually real. That's why in the dying days of WCW, when they were trying to convince us that someone was going off the script, it just came off as hacky. The fans who paid to see pro wrestling kind of hate it. Second, WWE superstars are not trained fighters. They are athletic actors. Yes, some of them are very real tough guys, but combat sports tend to result in a lot of injuries. That's one of the reasons they only fight a few times a year, unlike WWE superstars who can work several times a week. Over the course of this ill-fated tournament, several people were injured, including The Godfather, Steve Blackman, Hawk, Savio Vega, Droz. Third, in real sports, the favorites don't always win, so if you're putting together a tournament with the hopes of elevating a specific talent, maybe, I don't know, just book it like you would book every wrestling tournament since the early days of wrestling when Abe Lincoln hit George Hackenschmidt with his patented Lincoln leg drop. Well, in this very real tournament, Steve Williams got knocked out by lower card tag team wrestler Bodacious Bart Gunn in the quarterfinals. And what's worse is that Williams tore his quad during the bout and was out for months. When he came back, it just never happened for him. They weren't able to get back any of the momentum and he was released shortly afterwards. And maybe worse is because Steve Williams didn't win Brawl for All, he wasn't awarded with a comically large pair of gold novelty boxing gloves. They sent like an intern out to Spencer's to get those. Number 6, Paige. The WrestleMania 30 Divas Invitational match didn't end how it was supposed to. It was reported that the final spot in the match was going to feature AJ Lee locking Naomi in her Black Widow submission hold. Then, AJ would fool the referee by grabbing Naomi's hand and making it look like she had tapped out. But the referee was on the wrong side to see it, and then Naomi tapped out regularly. It was a cluster. All of this was supposed to lead to a rematch the next night on Raw with Naomi taking the title, but with Naomi tapping out clean as a whistle, she didn't have a claim to the belt, so the whole thing was scrapped. In its place, the decision was made to call up the current NXT Women's Champion Paige and have her best AJ Lee for the women's title in her debut, which is I hate this idea. Much like with the way they debuted Gail Kim by winning the championship, where do you go from there? Why are you wasting one of the biggest storylines you can tell with a talent, that being their first path to the title? I hate it. But alas, it's not like the WWE was renowned for making great choices with the women's division at the time. So the plan was in motion. And on the April 7th, 2014 episode of Monday Night Raw, AJ Lee defended the Divas title against Paige in an impromptu matchup. The match lasted 1 minute and 22 seconds, and this was Paige's only offense. Ugh. Yeah, that glorified leg sweep is called the Paige Turner, and it usually looks but that night, she didn't swing AJ Lee's leg back first, so it kinda looked bleh. At a panel at StarCast 5, Paige would discuss what happened that night by saying, AJ was like, okay, the only thing I don't want is a submission, just beat me clean. I don't want to tap out. I'm like, sounds good. I hate the Paige Turner, by the way. Yeah, it makes 2 of us. The reason why I stopped doing it is because after the match, I came back and Randy Orton was like, you beat her with a leg sweep? I'm like, I can't help it. That kind of move, you need 2 people and timing. But whatever. I have 2 other finishers I can pull out. Yeah, you have 2 other finishers? You should have used one of them. Number 7, Matt Sidell. Evan Bourne is probably a name WWE fans don't think about too often, but he was awesome back during his time with the company. Making his debut on the reimagined ECW in 2008, Bourne quickly became a fan favorite, known for his jaw-dropping finisher, the Airborne. Oh, look at it. Just majestic. His matches often featured fast-paced, high-risk maneuvers that thrilled audiences and earned him recognition as one of the WWE's top cruiserweight-style wrestlers. During his WWE tenure, Bourne captured the WWE Tag Team titles with Kofi Kingston forming the popular tag team Air Boom, and he's probably best known for being on the receiving end of one of the most memorable RKOs of all time. Bourne's tenure was marred by 2 violations of WWE's wellness policy, leading to suspensions in late 2011 and early 2012, which interrupted his momentum. Shortly after returning, Bourne suffered a serious foot injury in a motorcycle accident, requiring extensive surgeries and sidelining him for over a year. By the time he was cleared to compete, WWE's focus had shifted to newer talent, and the lack of emphasis on the cruiserweight division further limited its opportunities. In June 2014, WWE released Bourne as part of broader roster cuts. Despite this, Bourne reinvented himself on the independent scene and in major promotions like Impact Wrestling and New Japan Pro Wrestling, reclaiming his place as a dynamic and innovative performer under his original ring name, Matt Sidell. And at All Out 2020, Sidell made his debut for All Elite Wrestling as the Joker in the Casino Battle Royal. This spot is very important because it tends to be a surprise entrant, and Sidell was obviously very excited to be back on a major stage. He climbed to the top rope, ready to unleash his patented shooting star press, and that sucks. AEW decided to have a little fun with it, revealing in an episode of Being the Elite that Michael Nakazawa had doused the ropes with baby oil before the match, but Sidell smartly took this as a sign that it might be time to change up his offense a bit. Well, there's our list. Did we forget any other wrestlers who screwed up their first big moments? If so, please leave them in the comments section below. Also, if you enjoyed this, please like the video, subscribe to the channel, and shooting star press that notification bell. Careful. Till next time, I'm Senior Siete for 7 Wrestling saying bye-bye.